I am right in the middle of another playthrough of one of my favorite games of all time, Knights of the Old Republic, namely the first installment in that saga, a game that I will probably go through on this channel at some point, but what I want to say is that it brought me back to the very first thing that I talked about on this channel, another game from the same developer, Neverwinter Nights, and this realization that despite my words, or well, I did mention that the probability of me going back to that game is rather high, but now it's not just probability, it's certainty. It is loosely connected. I have encountered a not exactly important portion of Knights of the Old Republic, but a quest that I have yet to complete, and I've been replaying the game for the last 2 decades. I would assume that during that time I've seen and read through everything the game has to offer, and yet, in a manner similar to my experience with the Shaldrisas quest in Neverwinter Nights, I have encountered something new, and it is without any story changing mods or some large deviations from how I usually play games. So that led me to this realization that I will definitely talk some more about Neverwinter. I will most probably replay it in the near future again, maybe even try some of the fan-made modules, and all in all just go through the game again, appreciate the original campaign. I will most probably not return to either one of the DLCs, nor will I talk about them for reasons some I had alluded to when I was going through the game in my videos, some more that my warped, twisted mind added on top of that in the last few months, but that only served to highlight my respect and admiration for the original campaign, regardless of how unfinished or rushed it supposedly was. For me, it's the part that checks the most boxes on my list of stories that I can wholeheartedly enjoy. While on the subject of such stories, I'm going to switch to the adventures of the Rapid Arrows and their latest mishaps, or Speedies to be precise, and his terrible loss of the Easter bread that he's been carrying around with him all this time, protecting it, and then his unbreakable resolve to boast cost him dearly, and now they are standing in front of a similar obstacle as twice before now. The terrain is impossible, and they have to cross the stream again. This time there is no convenient log to use as a bridge, so Mirek comes up with a plan to climb a nearby tree, advance alongside one of its branches as far as possible, one that is hanging over the water, and then jump using it as a spring, or sort of, and hopefully land on the other side of the stream. Meanwhile, they'll have to throw their bags over the water. Additional weight is not exactly what they need right now. Also, on a side note, the art of this particular chapter is vastly different. It feels a bit smudged and unclear. It's probably the publisher's issue because the next one is again crispy clear and by the same authors, so I just wanted to mention that. Well, Mirek is the first one to attempt the jump as the propagator of the plan. He is not one of those generals commanding from the backlines. He's leading the charge, And even though the balance might be a bit of an issue, the swaying of the branch is not exactly helpful for their cause. But despite that, putting some serious power into the jump lands Mirek safely on the other side. He just reminds the rest of the club that they really have to put their legs into the jump, otherwise they'll land right in the middle of the stream. Fortunately, the landing itself seems to be quite soft thanks to the terrain on the other side of the stream that he likens to a curd, and then the tossing of the bags and the great traversal of the rest of the club begins. Everyone is successful, but the last person, poor Redcap, botches the jump, doesn't use enough strength, and lands himself in the water, resigned to just taking a bath while he is already there. With Speedy, the disaster personified himself, wondering how can one be so clumsy, considering the fact that his clothes and bag aren't even completely dry yet. It is a bit ironic. Afterwards, they finally reach some signs of civilization, an inn where the innkeeper offers them not just a place to spend the night in, but warns them that the terrain around the stream becomes even steeper and more challenging. So the only way to truly explore it and see the entire section of the scenery around is to use some inflatable boats which he has stored for the summer guests and is willing to lend them to the Rapideros. So Speedy immediately begins inflating one, and in that same panel, there is quite a big bunch of garlic hanging on the side of the bar. A few possible explanations might be superstition. I think that in Czech folklore it is usable as a protection not just against vampires but also other mythical creatures, and this seems to be a very rural area. Could be something similar to hanging a horseshoe above the door or something like that. And then there is the explanation that just offers itself since it is a place where food is served, that it truly is just an innocent ingredient. But now when I'm looking at it, it just felt worth mentioning, I guess. And then during the night when the club is fully ready to sleep, Speedy hears someone knocking on the window. He arms himself with a shoe that apparently reassures him at least slightly, and then the club approaches their guests. It turns out they are some boys that are possibly locals, and they issue a challenge to the Rapideros, introducing themselves as a club called Ditiscus as the animal, and probably because they are around the stream and water all the time, the fight will happen on the rocky river. And even though the Rapideros are not exactly sure about the particulars of this upcoming war, albeit it is dubbed by the initiators as a friendly fight, even though it might get a bit rough. Well, the challenge is accepted, and the next day everything seems to be helping them to enjoy everything as much as possible. The sun is shining, the water seems to have calmed down after the outpour that occurred the previous week. So it seems that even if some involuntary swimming happens, it won't be a catastrophe. Everyone has their own boat, and it's time to set them onto the water and begin their journey slash friendly bout with the rival club. Speedy issues a warning to his boat that things will get ugly if he gets dumped into the water. Everything is nice and well, clear skies, the flow is great, and all the menaces of the sea are ready for any encounter they might possibly experience. And the very first confrontation with the Discuses is with one laying across the stream far above the surface, using a log laid across the chasm, the stream, small river, big stream, it's somewhere in between these two, is flowing through, and this particular Discus has a rope tied to one of his hands, and at the end of that rope is a large boulder hanging down at just a length that keeps it above the surface. He is swinging it from side to side, preventing the Rapidaros from continuing their journey. Mirek springs into action and, in a brilliant display of coordination and strength, manages to grab onto the rope and onto the stone and threatens to drag the little Discus down with the rock right into the river. The struggle continues for merely seconds before the enemy decides that it is over and his fate is sealed and begs for mercy, giving up, and thus giving the Rapidaros the first victory of this war. The celebrations, though, don't last very long because the Discuses had built a dam in preparations for the upcoming conflict, and right when the Rapidaros are sailing underneath them, they release the river, disregarding the fact that, as Speedy pointed out, they are no radish and thus need no watering, but this flood is way too strong, and it's the Rapidaro's turn to beg their enemy for respite and stop the water, which evens out the score, with Speedy complaining that it must have been an entire lake just dropped on top of their heads, and the war continues. In the next video, I'm going to stop here, going to come back to world building in the next one, hopefully, unless I get another spontaneous idea on what to talk about during the introduction, and then more rapid arrows.